There we are. All right. I think we should be ready now. Mic check is clear. Slide is shared. Everything seems to be fine. Good morning, everyone. My name is Logan Nielsen. I work for an organization called Their Gender. It's an organization working broadly with gender equality issues, but where we focus specifically on engaging men in gender equality work. Um, I've been focusing my presentation mostly on the engaging part, trying to understand what it means to engage men in gender equality, um, what issues are involved, what best practices we can think of, and I hope that's something we can do together throughout the day. Um, as one of my good Austrian colleagues told me, or I think she shared a very good point. She said, all gender equality work in the end is violence prevention. And that's something I always keep in mind. So I will be talking about violence prevention today, but not exclusively. But I think it's good to keep in mind that, especially when we work with men and masculinity, and in transforming ideas of what it means to be a man, uh, I think we can fairly say that in the end, it will always be a prevention of violence, because I think a lot of the reasons that we both have the history of men being trained, uh, our bodies being prepared to do violence, of men being taught to understand violence as a solution. So that's one problem. So in transforming that, we already work to prevent violence, and in transforming men's positive self development, self relation, in finding new ways men can relate to each other and to society, we are already changing masculinity away from the more toxic, the more negative, towards something more positive. And I think in doing that, we are already doing violence prevention. And that's also why I have chosen a bit positively to call this presentation Engaging Men in Gender Equality a win-win for all, because I think that's where we will land. But let's see how we go. Let me just run you through the program I have prepared. Uh, there we are. So for the next 90 minutes, I will do a short intro. I will do a presentation, my thoughts about why we should engage men in gender equality and what challenges there are. It's also based on my experience working with that gender. Of course, I've been affiliated with the organization since 2015, where it all began. But I've also had I just returned from Nigeria, where I worked at the European Union Embassy. So I've also had some experiences from abroad and from other fields. But I've been more or less loosely affiliated with the agenda since 2015. So it's based on those experiences. Then we will go on to, oh yeah, and I need to say, while I'm giving my talk, please feel free to comment in the chat all you like. I will see if I can pick up your comments afterwards. Please feel free to raise your hand if you wish to say something, but I will not ask you to submit your input before after I've given my presentation, because I think that it makes the flow better. Then we'll go on to a group exercise on why to engage men in gender equality, where you will have the chance to talk to each other, reflect on the presentation, share your own experiences. And then I've prepared a small game for you. The game is both a way to stimulate a conversation about engaging men in gender equality work, but it's also one of the tools we are using ourselves. I will talk more about that later. Then we will go to the next session, some best practices for how to engage men in gender equality work. I will talk more about the work that Gender has been doing. And then I hope we can have a conversation together where you can share your best practices, or the contrary, where it can go really wrong. And then lastly, we will do a roundup. So small technical issue. Cecilia, if I take my notes, can you still see the presentation?
Yes, we can see the presentation. Right now we're watching the presentation. Yes.
Perfect. All right, I just wanted to make sure. All right, so when I was making the presentation, I'm always thinking that when we say men, we always have a certain image in our head. We always have a certain idea about who are the men we are talking about. But of course, when we have that image in our head, there is also a lot of men we're not talking about or thinking about. So that would be my first reflection. What kind of men are we talking about when we are talking about engaging men in gender equality? I think whatever image you are having in your head right now, keep it. Maybe that is exactly the man you should be, the type of man you should be working with, maybe not. But I think it's of course important to recognize what skin color is that person having, what religion is that person having, what sexuality or just general appearance is that person having. And that's also what was mentioned in the beginning, this norm critical approach to gender. Who are we thinking about and who are we not thinking about when we say gender, when we say men, when we say women, when we say all these things? But I also want to add this because in their gender, you could say our approach is what you call heteronormative. We work a lot with sort of mainstream society. We wish to bring the conversation of gender to the places where you do not find it often. Outside the big cities, at workplaces where they don't talk about gender, where they don't see it. And in doing that, we are very conscious about what we say and what we do not say, because there's a lot of things we omit in our presentations. There's a lot of things we do not talk about. So those of you out there who have a really norm-critical approach already, you'll probably notice that. You'll probably notice some binary language and all that. Please feel free to address it. Please feel free to call it out. I would love to have that conversation as well. But also understand that it's also a conscious choice from our side to see how can we work in a way where we make gender relevant, where we make masculinity relevant for people who are not used to talk about it. Also, I think it's important to recognize that when we talk about engaging men in equality work in general, many men are already engaged in equality work. For example, gay liberation movements have been engaged in equality work throughout history for a long time. And I would say when we work with masculinity today, we also build on that foundation. We build on the men who have already shown how you can actually have an alternative masculinity. So I think that's important to recognize as well. Then I just wanted to talk a little bit about Denmark. And that was because when I made this presentation, I was also thinking that every time I've given a presentation about Nigeria, I always tell people to look at a map and find out where Nigeria is, because that's important for understanding the country. So let me just briefly show you where Denmark is on the map for those of you who are thinking, where is Denmark at all? So right now we are placed in, or I'm sitting in the north of Europe and in the south of Scandinavia, in an old monarchy stretching 1200 years back, in a very homogeneous society with almost only one ethnic group speaking one language. A very stable and peaceful society with a low unemployment rate and a high GDP. And I think that's important because that's my context. That's where I'm speaking from. And I've decided today not to include any statistics or observations from countries outside Denmark. So I'll be speaking from Denmark today. And as you see on the map, it's a tiny country. It's surrounded by water, a very maritime country. We are less than 6 million people. My Nigerian colleagues always laugh when I said that, because as they said, well, that's smaller than just one Nigerian state. And it is a small country, but that's the context I'm speaking from today. Now, the issue of why engaging men in gender equality. First, let's just talk about what do we actually mean when we say engage. So when we talk about engaging, on the one hand, I think it sounds like we are giving space to someone. And who is it then we're giving space to? And who is giving that space? Is it women who are giving space to men? Is it feminist organizations who are giving space to men? Or what is it? And why should that space even be given to begin with? I think it's important to recognize that when we talk about engaging men, we do not only talk about giving space or letting someone in. We, of course, also talk about stepping up to a responsibility. We talk about men recognizing an issue and stepping up to a challenge. So when we talk about engaging, it's a reciprocal thing. It's mutual. It's both ways. I also think we can talk about a direct engagement and an indirect engagement. So the direct engagement would be the activism, men engaging in gender equality organizations. But I also think the indirect engagement is just as important. Men calling out sexism, working to promote good communities, good interrelations, taking parental leaves, all the everyday things that men can do to support, to be allies, to step up to the challenge. The first thing I will point out of why we should engage men in gender equality is that although men is an essential part of the problem, they're also an essential part of the solution. When we work with women, we only work with half the population. We only work with half of the issue. When we teach women to say no, we also need to have men who are not doing it already. Men who say no, men who are not harassing, who are not being violent. And to do that, we need to work directly with men. We need to engage masculinity norms critically. When we only have a women focus, we only work with the effect and not the cause of the problem, because the cause of the problem is not the woman who's being a victim of violence. The cause of the problem is, of course, the man who is perpetrating the violence. You can also take it in other scenes. Let's talk about political representation. We can empower women to seek political representation. But why not have men who vote for women? Why not have men who accept women and give space to women, the men who already have political power? And this is why I think that when we have a masculinity focus in our gender work, we work more directly with a wholesome solution where we address both sides of the issues. But that's not to say that we should not have a woman focus. That should still be a primary focus. But we need to have this wholesome solution if we want to address society as a whole, if we want to make the step forward. Another reason I think we should engage men in gender equality is that although men are overrepresented at the top of Danish society, they are also overrepresented at the bottom of Danish society. Most men have benefited a lot from privileges and power. They become CEOs, they become board members, they have access to money, they have access to power. But we also see from statistics that many men end up socially vulnerable. Life expectancy of men in Denmark is 79.9 years old. For women, it's 83.6. Women are more likely to visit medical professions. And in Denmark, it is estimated that men are 150 to 200% more likely to die from diseases associated with lifestyle choices. That could be cancer, that could be heart failure, that could be respiratory diseases. 77% of all homeless people in Denmark are men. And most of the people who commit suicide in Denmark are also men. If we want to address these issues of socially vulnerable men, we need to look at masculinity norms. We need to look at risk behavior, taking unnecessary risks. We need to look at how can we improve communication? How can we teach men to reach out, talk about their feelings before it goes wrong, before they become isolated, before they become depressed, before they get to a point where they're not able to reach out and seek for help. Because men have very few coping mechanisms. They're taught to be tough. They're taught to handle things themselves. So they do not communicate. They're taught to be providers. They're taught that if they are not providers, they are failures. If they consider themselves failures, they're more prone to get into negative patterns, leading to some of the before mentioned problems. We also have a problem sometimes as societies to see men's vulnerabilities, and that was something we experienced with Dad Gender in the beginning when we were starting to do this job. When we contacted people and said we want to work with men and their vulnerabilities, people told us, "No, but men, they don't have any vulnerabilities. They just need to go out and find a job, then everything will be okay." So there was this understanding that men are not vulnerable. Men just need to find a job, find a wife, start a family, all that, and then everything will be okay. And these gender norms are, of course, something we need to change if we want to give men the tools to address situations. Again, I would say that transforming masculinity and engaging men is a win-win. Again, talking about violence prevention, we see in Denmark that many of the men who are doing online harassment, digital harassment, who are talking negatively about women, who are engaging in communities where they talk about that women shouldn't have access to vote, who are promoting violence against LGBT plus communities and so forth. A lot of these men are isolated men. They are socially isolated. They are frustrated. They have very few positive interactions. So even in reaching out and giving these people, these men, the tools to communicate, to get good social relations, already here we are addressing problems that lead to violence. We can also see, and I have a feeling that that some of my colleagues will be talking about this later, that when we engage men and transform ideas of masculinity, we can have men who become better family members, which is also a win-win for all. We have men who can support women's autonomy, for example, by taking care of the children, so women can succeed in work life. We have men who get better coping mechanisms, better personal development. And I think, especially in Denmark, we're talking a lot about parental leave as that's where you can really see the difference. So if you look at parental leave in Denmark, a man on average will take 31.9 days. A woman in average will take 273.9 days of parental leave. This creates a family pattern where the woman will be mostly responsible for taking care of the child, taking the sick leave days, running off to the kindergarten, all these things, that will be the woman's primary responsibility. This contributes to the gender pay gap. This contributes to women's chance of getting a better pensions. And it also creates a pattern where men are not sufficiently engaged in family life. They don't know how to create good relations with the kids. That hits them especially if you have a divorce situation, if you have a custody case. Men do not know how to fend for themselves. They do not know how to represent themselves in court. They do not know how to create good relations with their kids after a divorce. And that again creates isolation, creates bad patterns, and again leads to negative patterns that can in the end lead to violence. Another thing is also things like overconfidence or not being willing or to admit mistakes. That can result in bad leadership decisions. It can result in more accidents in the workplaces, which again both hurt men, their families, and everyone else. So I think there's a lot of good reasons for why it makes sense to engage men, but that doesn't mean there are not challenges. One main challenge is, of course, that some men gain privileges and power from gender equality, which makes it difficult for men to engage, because engaging in gender equality can feel like you're losing out. Many men are still at the top of society, and for them, engaging in gender equality can feel like they're reaching for the bottom, like they have something to lose. And this is, of course, a problem. It's also a problem when engaging men to find out when should men step up, and more important, when should they step down. In Denmark, we talk about a lot about the knight savior complex. So that men are taught to save women, and that can also be translated to gender equality. Men go into gender equality with an idea that now we go in to save the poor women, and that creates problem both in an organization, in the attitude to work, because how can you work transformatively if you already work with the negative ideas of masculinity that you were brought up with? Then we have the idea that it can be difficult to acknowledge that you have a problem that lies out to yourself. If you're told that masculinity in itself is a problem, and you think, hey, but I'm a man, masculinity, that's part of me, but I'm not a problem. That's the baseline of the not all men sentence that you have all probably heard countless of times, that it's difficult to acknowledge that there is a problem that has something to do with you, but you would say, but it's not about me, I didn't do this. So it can be difficult for men to actually acknowledge that they're part of a problem. Another thing is that the men are gender blind, mostly, at least. They do not see gender. They do not see it as something relevant for them. They see it as a woman's issue or an LGBT plus issue. And we see that a lot when doing gender workshops. I've also seen it at the embassy in the development sector. When you say today there is a talk about gender, you'll see men reaching for their phone, not necessarily because they're not interested, but just because they're like, well, this is not for me. Today we talk about gender, so gender is about women. And I think that's maybe one lesson, something that I'm trying to work with myself. When we say gender, we should mean gender. When we say gender, we mean all genders. If we want to talk about women or want to talk about men, we should be specific about that. Then we say today is about women or today is about men. Because we have a tradition where when we say gender, actually we mean women. And we need to do something about that. But we also need to find ways to make masculinity visible for men. Because men are not used to seeing themselves as a gender. They're not used to seeing themselves as having gender challenges. Another thing is also, and that relates to the not all men point, but it can be vulnerable to admit that you have a gender challenge. Because men like to see the big picture. They like to say, oh, it's a political problem. It's a social problem. But to say it's an identity problem, it's a masculinity problem, it's a gender problem, then it's suddenly about you and your relation to the world and your self-development. And that can be difficult for men to take in. Then we have the problem that some men can fear to be judged by their male peers if they intervene. Many men are competitive. They're socialized to be competitive and hierarchical. So if you come in as a man and say, no, but we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do that, we should be more tuned into gender equality, that can be seen as something you're bringing into the struggle for domination in a male group.
Just a heads up, we are running a little late on this presentation, just maybe a few minutes, and then we have to go to the group work. Sorry, Logan.
Yeah, no problem. That's perfect. That's perfect. And I'll wrap it up. I'm almost done. So it can be seen as something you're bringing into a culture. It can be seen as hypocritical that you that you call other men out. They will look at you and say, "But what about yourself? What have you done?" There can be opposition to engaging men in gender equality. Many people are arguing, why divert resources away from women's work to working with men? Men need to step up to the challenge. They need to be willing to transform. And then we need to think about, what does men's engagement in gender equality actually look like? Who kind of men, what kind of men are we talking about? And that was also the point I raised earlier when talking about men. What is it exactly we mean? Who are we working with? Who are we not working with? And so on.
I think we will now move on to the second session of the day, which will be facilitated by Happy and Mervis from Action Hope Malawi. And Action Hope Malawi, as the name indicates, is a civil society organization based in Malawi. And among other things, they work with sex workers on HIV prevention, human rights, and prevention of gender-based violence in 3 districts in Malawi, Machinga, Sumba, and Blantyre. And I think first I would give the word to Happy and Mervis, I think also you two. And afterwards we will show a video interview or documentary which has been produced by Action Hope Malawi for this seminar. And I received the video yesterday. Thank you very much, Action Hope Malawi, and I watched it. And I will have to make a disclaimer, because this video shows some very graphic images of the harsh reality that some of these women live in. And I make the disclaimer because everybody should have the option to choose if you want to watch a video with very graphic images. And there is one in particular of a woman who is, and correct me if I'm not right, Happy, who's been murdered. And she's got a very open wound in her neck. And we see this image more than once in the video. I just want to make the disclaimer so everybody can choose, need to know what you will be watching. And I will make this disclaimer again before showing the video, so everybody are aware of these images in the video. But I don't know, Happy and Mervis, if you're ready, then I should show your presentation, correct?
Yes, hi Cecilia, we are ready.
Excellent.
Yes.
So I will share the screen, and Happy, you will just tell me when I should move to the next slide, right? And you have more or less 5 minutes for this presentation to leave time for the video, which where we will actually meet some of the male champions and female sex workers, which is 15 minutes in total. I will share my screen.
All right.
And we will move on to the first, and I will just, you can see my screen, and I will show this. So take it away, Happy.
All right. Cecilia has already introduced Action Hope Malawi, so you are already aware of who we are, where we are based. Today we are going to present about the male champions model. You can go to the next slide. Okay, the presentation outline is like, we'll start with the introduction, then the background a little bit and successes of the male champions model. Then we'll finish with the video clip, which we have documented some of the work we do with the male champions. Can move to the next slide. Just, a little bit of the background. With support from AIDS-funded Action Malawi implemented a project on prevention of HIV and violence among key populations, especially female sex workers from 2017 to 2018. The project targeted the following stakeholders, like health service providers, police officers, the judiciary, and some of the local leaders. And when we implemented this project, we realized that the main clients of the sex workers were not among the targeted beneficiaries. So we identified that gap. Okay, you can move to the next slide. Yeah. So this had a negative impact on our project because we were documenting a lot of violations from sex workers whose perpetrators were the clients, in this case, the men. As a result, AHM with peer educators, we sat down and decided to involve volunteers like bar owners, bartenders, token masters, community in general, men, clients, who are always found in the drinking joints. And we approached them to seek support on whether they can be involved to support the female sex workers whenever there is an incident in the hotspots. We also involved the local chiefs, considering that these are very influential in the communities when it comes to power relations. So we also considered involving local chiefs, local chiefs to be part of these men who should be involved directly in the project. So we decided to come with a general name for these volunteers who will be involved in the project. So we chose the name Male Champions. So from July 2018, when the model was introduced, AHM has made the following achievements. There is a reduction in number of reported cases of violations experienced by sex workers from clients. This is due because we have sensitized male champions to conduct campaigns on human rights, both at hotspot level, community level, targeting the clients of these sex workers. We have also noted that there's a strong working relationship between the police officers and female sex workers. Sex workers are being assisted accordingly by police officers now when there is a case of violation, because they are able to raise these male champions to aid them in following up on cases and guiding them to report to the proper authorities like the police. There's also a good working relationship between the male champions and the female sex workers, which has also contributed to the reduction of violence cases reported to the police by female sex workers. Most of the cases are resolved by male champions directly at the hotspot level. They don't need further assistance from the police. Some of the successes, I shouldn't talk much because we have the beneficiaries directly talking about what they do at the hotspot. So you can show the video clip. I think there was already a disclaimer, but maybe you can just repeat, Cecilia, for those who were not yet here about the graphics in the video. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Happy, for this introduction. And as you say, we make this disclaimer because there are some very graphic images in this video. And I will say it again because you need to choose whether you can stomach these pictures. And there's a particular one photo of a woman who's been murdered, correctly? Yes. And she's got an open wound in her neck. And you see this, and you see it multiple times in the video. And of course, this depicts the very, very harsh reality of these women. And of course, it depicts why is it that Action Hope Malawi works with these women. And why it is so important, the work that these male champions are doing, because you mentioned some of the successes, but really highlight that the level of violence in these hotspots where you work and where the male champions work has decreased significantly. So it is very important. But I want to, again, say before I share the video, there are some very, very graphic and upsetting images. So you need to choose whether you can stomach this, because it's not for the faint of heart. I will show the video now.
Malawi is characterized by a high prevalence of violence against women and girls, from traditional practices that harm girls and teenagers, from sexual initiation rituals to child marriage, to sexual and gender-based violence and intimate partner violence. There are formal structures like victim support units in police formations and communities to respond to various forms of violence, but a good proportion of survivors of violence do not systematically utilize them due to lack of knowledge, among other reasons. With funding from CISU through AIDS Funded, Action Hope Malawi is implementing a 3-year HIV prevention among key population program in Malawi. During the implementation of the program, Action Hope Malawi noted the consistent rise in gender-based violence among sex workers, which led to loss of lives and serious injuries. Action Hope Malawi introduced a male champion model to involve males in preventing all forms of violence which were directly affecting female sex workers. Sex workers highlighted that some cases needed an urgent attention rather than waiting for police to act. Sex workers also pointed out that they never had a good relationship with the police. This model enables bar owners, bar customers, pool table token masters, and bartenders, among others, to be the first responders for sex workers when they experience any form of human rights violations.
Kuyambira penipeni sikala mene wanu kumani kazi zosiyana siyana ngati kumenyedwa penaso mwina kuphedwa kumene ngeno pachifani mene chicho ife amelo champions timakati kwateteza anthu amene wawo kuona kuti nkhanza zimene zizo zisamachitika kwa iwowa chifukwa choti pamakhala zoti mwina atengana ndi mamuna kuzika kuti umene kuchakoso sanagulizane kuzika kuti munthu wamenyedwa nkhanza ngati zimene zozo zimene takati kulimana nazo kuti zichebe cheseko nkhanza ngati zimene
Moses Kameretwa ndichokera hotspot ya Patrolo. Nkhanza zimene zimabwera kwa kuchokera kwa atsikana zinazizindikira pa nthawi imene Action Hope Malawi inati panga introduce za gender based violence. Zimene zimabwera kwa kuchokera kwa atsikana zinazizindikira pa nthawi imene Action Hope Malawi inati panga introduce za gender based violence. Zimene zimabwera kwa kuchokera kwa atsikana zinazizindikira pa nthawi imene Action Hope Malawi inati panga introduce za gender based violence. Zimene zimabwera kwa kuchokera kwa atsikana zinazizindikira pa nthawi imene Action Hope Malawi inati panga introduce za gender based violence. Zimene zimabwera kwa kuchokera kwa atsikana zinazizindikira pa nthawi imene Action Hope Malawi inati panga introduce za gender based violence. Zimene zimabwera kwa kuchokera kwa atsikana zinazizindikira pa nthawi imene Action Hope Malawi inati panga introduce za gender based violence. Zimene zimabwera kwa kuchokera kwa atsikana zinazizindikira pa nthawi imene Action Hope Malawi inati panga introduce za gender based male champions and tinayamba kugwirizana ndi atsikana amene amapezeka m'mabala akati pasa madandaulo awo amene amapezeka malingana ndi mmene apezera ena amapezeka kuti apasidwa amenyedwa koma akamenyedwa amatipeza akatipeza timathandiza malingana kupitaso nawonso ku polisi kuti athandizike malingana ndi mmene zimakhalira.
Jamba ndiye kochi mwaza male champion wa mpunga asikana akomanikhanza akatifotokozera nkhaniyo ndikakhati ifeyo alepera kuipangalizo kunkhanija timapita nayo police victim support akati kutithandiza kusolva nkhanija.
Ndizonena kuti ifeyo ndi apolisi kumapita nawo ntchito limodzi mofanana kusonza kuti nkhanza yonse ikachitika kaichitika usiku kaiteno ka 2 o'clock 5 eyo ndi achainake mabottle store komanso timakhala tikugwira ntchito pomwepa ndiye nkhanza ina yonse ikachitika kuti mtsikana 6 weka wachitidwa nkhanza nthawi yomweyo timaitenga nkhani ngati talephera kupanga solve kupita nayo kupolisi kuti akatithandiza polisi.
Ife amene champions titadziwitsidwa ndondomeko imeneyi tinagwirizana ndi apolisi amene timathandizana nawo kuti munthu akakhala kuti wamenya mtsikana timachipita tikapanga ripoti polisi apolisi amatithandiza kumpeza munthu uja ndikumugwira ndikumpitisa ku court.
Komanso nkhani ya polisi tikugwira nawo ntchito bwino ife ndi apolisi tikugwira ntchito ndithu mofanana palibe kusiyanisa ndiyeti toyena kuti ife male champions tisanambe kugwira ntchito titapanga bungwe limene lilo Action Hope Malawi atafika ndikutiuza ndikutiphunzitsa tinapitanso kupolisi ukauza ntchito imene ife tikugwira ndiye kotero kuti ife tikapitisa nkhani umene kuti apachikachitika chinthu nochamatilandira ndithu mwabwinobwino ndipo ntchitoyo ndithu amayigwira kuona kuti vuto imene tabweresalo latheka ndithu atithandiza moyenderera.
Tikapitisa nkhani ku polisi nkhani ija timayitsata malingana imene tayichokesera chifukwa tayitenga ndife nkhani kuchokera pamene panamenyedwa mtsikana timayitsata kuti apolisi akupanga bwanji kwa mbuyomo apolisi poyamba anali oti samathandiza malingana ndi mmene amakhalira atsikana amakhala ndi anthu akuti odesedwa koma titagwirizana ndi apolisi tinapezeka kuti akutithandiza ali kwambiri ndipo nkhaniyo timayipanga folo mpaka kumalizika kwache kwa nkhani.
Kuonjezerapo nkhani ikakhale mwina tafikira apolisi ndiwo achasakuthandiza mwina victim support sikutithandiza timafikira officer in charge ngati pale kufika kuti nkhani ijapite ku court timene akuisatira moduza ndi apolisiwo kuti tipite ku court mpaka na nkhani ijakhala kuti chilungamo cha nkhani ijachitika kufuwa munthu ukhale mupitirize kutetezedwa kutenenso azikhala mwaufulu monga wina aliyense.
Chiyambire chakugwira ntchito athu ngati male champions tafikira atsikana amene timagwira nawo ntchito nthawi zambiri zimene zimachitika zokuti amapezeka kuti akugwirizana ndi munthu akupita naye kanyengana naye asanalandire ndalama timayesesa kuti azitha kulandiratu ndalama kuti timapangisa kuti anthu amenyedwe timakhala kuti asanapasidwe ndalama pa nthawi imeneyo komanso chimene tapanga chipo ndiye kuti tayesesa kuti pamalo pakakhala kuti pabala pakakhala kuti pali atsikana kapena mtsikana akhala kuti akumenyedwa akationa ife anthu aja amakhala kuti ali ndi mantha kuti sampange chipongwe mtsikanayi kuti pali ndani pali male champions amene ali apapa.
Ife ngati male champions timazwisa anthu kuti aziweza ufulu wa atsikana wenda ife pali yese ni munthu umene ali wina aliyense ngati kwampunga kuti mapanga involve mafumu akwathu mapanga simameeting kuti anthu aziziwa ufulu wa atsikanawo kuti ndikodani then ngati kuti pakadali panopo anthu akuziwa za nkhanza kuti akapanga choyenda chisotsikana wenda kuti nkhanza umene angapangenso naye yese kuti nayenso ali ufulu then komiti yakwathu anthu amasata
ife ndithu vuto imeneyi takhala nawo moti panopono tikadautilatirako nthawi zambiri atsikana ang'onoang'ono ma underage amapezeka kuti akumapezeka malo omwera mowa zimenezo zinapangisa kuti ife mwina tithe kuwauza timalangiza simuloyenekera kukhala panopo zikatoa kuna timata kuwaziwisa anzathu apolisi metanena kuti timagwira ntchito ndi apolisi uku ndi uku timata mwina kupanga ndithu exercise yona kuti atsikana amene asamapezeka mmene momwe. ndipo panopo tinanene kuti no improvement ilipo for asikana amene sakupezekaso malo omwe na mmoyo.
Samuel Kalunga mangina chilo ndi chalaja kwake ankhani ya asikana ayi akhapo kuthandizira asikana kwazo pena asikana athu amapezeka ndi vuto apezeka kambirana ndi mwamuna wakuja kuti mwina iyayi amene tikuita pakati pa 5,000 after kuthana mamaluva aja mapezeka kuti pa 7,000 ife tutakhatukala ngira asikana alimuka pamene mwatengana ndi mwamuna muyeneka kupanga mtengo umodzi ukathanaye mwamuna ayo musamungire manje zozi mayambisa makokoso ndedu kuthokoza kuti asikana athu panopoyamba kusata zimene tinawuza mwaso no milandu ikuoneka chichepa chifukwa kuti malangizo amene timapasa ayamba kwasani
ankhani imene tapanga chief yoti mbuyo panapezeka mtsikana amene ananyamuka ndi mnyamata kutenga mwamphamvu zake kupita kukamunyenga atamunyenga anatenga bodo la fanta la coca-cola ndimulowesa malo bisika kazi uyazitandelo anapeza anazadandaula zitatipeza ifeyo tinayisesa kwira nyamata oja kumpitisa muli kana nyamata oja anapeza dandaula
mavuto amene timakumana nawo ngati ife Mamelo Champions ndionena kuti kuno kuchinama ayindi kachimentere yaikulu ndeno tili ma hotspot almost about 10 or 15 ndeno ntchito yathu timakhala kuti timagwira ndi usiku chifukwa kuti asikanawa mavuto amakumana nawo nthawi imene limene amabwera kugwira nawo nonso zapeza makastoma ndeno nkhanza zamachitidwa nthawi ngati iti imeneyo ndiye makamaka mayendedwe kuti tichoke pa hotspot ina tipitanso pa hotspot ina kapenanso pena mwina akatiimbira kuti kunoko wakuti wamenyedwa kapena pali mwina mwana wang'ono amene awapezeka kuno kuti tiyende kuti mtoti kapezeka amene nthawi ndi makadani mavuto kuti amayendedwe komabe paifeyo tokha timayesesa kuti ndithu tipite umene koko tikalangize ndithu ngati kuli koteka ngati tamvana kulangiza kuti azimakhaza tilamwepo ngati sinamvane kanija timayitengera ndithu mpaka nakutika ndi polisi komanso tithokoza kuti Action Hope Malawi anatipasa ukadaulo omwe timatha mwina kuphunzisaso ife anthu ena kuyenda malo mosiyanasiyana tikuphunzisa ndithu ukadaulo umene tiyena kuthokoza kuti no anatiphunzisa ndipo zimene zonse ifeso zimene zikutithandiza kuti tigwire ntchito yathu.
Ifeyo timadziwika malingana ndi Action Hope Malawi tikafika pamalo amadziwa kuti uyoyo ndi Mamelo Champion malingana ndi zovala zimene timakhala nazo. Action Hope Malawi imatipasa zinthu zosiyana-siyana zimene zimatidziwisa kuti kulo uyoyo wafikayo ndothandiza asikana ndi anthu ena aliwonse amene amapezeka m'malo omwera mowa.
Tithokoze ya Action Hope Malawi amene nthawi imene timayamba kukazisa group ya Mamelo Champions anatipasa zambiri zimene zinapangisa kuti aitane apolisi amene ali pamodzi akuchipatala ndefenso kusatira gawo limene anatipusisalo ngati Mamelo Champions akuampunga nafenso tinachitenga kwa kumana ndi mafumu amkusoma kwathu komanso paliponse pene tingakonde ngati kuchipatala chimene timakatenga kumakondo msipisazi tikachiwa zina Action Hope amaziwa kuti tikagwiritsa ntchito yoyenera amatipasanso malangizo timakumana ndi anthu ochokera kuchipatala amene amatengera kuzagwiritsa asikana athu amene angakhalire ndi moyo wawo zonsezi zinachitika cha Action Hope kuyambira ku polisi kuchipatala kwa mfumu kulera kwathu tonse timagwira ntchito limodzi ngati Mamelo Champions.
Male champions help female sex workers to have conducive working environment and at the same time improving their well-being. The involvement of male champions in this program has proven to be effective in as far as prevention of GBV is concerned. The male champions are able to raise human rights awareness at hotspot level, encourage their fellow male counterparts to consistently use condoms and stop harassing sex workers. Previously, female sex workers were hacked and killed by their customers and the community as a whole. Most sex workers were not reporting these cases to police due to fear. Female sex workers are the main vulnerable group to gender-based violence, and there are few interventions that target them.
Zinangandineda badoni hiyo tiketi ya kumalosa. Sana bwana Mamelo Champion ndi makuma ndi kaza zosiyana monga kunyengedwa ulele, edwa, kubeledwa. Mimi na bwana Mamelo Champion kumanda Mamelo Champion tinachitika nchokuti tinadandaula kwa Action Hope Malawi mafuta amene makumana nawo ndiye anatirumikizana ndi anthu amene amapezeka malo amangati magala mabaona ngati matoken man maso a police unit kuti azitha kutithandiza panthu amene mali mavuto. Penda amene champion timagwira ntchito bwino chifukwa panthu amene tikugwira ntchito athu usiku mavuto timakumana usiku. Matho amenyedwa pabala amene champion aja makhali pafupi amatha kutithandizira amatenga issue chopana ku polisi amene polisi nkhani jamatha kuisata kuti aone chilungamo chimene chatani amene chathera. Amene champion amatitenga kuti khazika malo amodzi tikakhala malo amodzi munthu amene mtakupana naye uja amatha kuti unikira kaye akatiunikira yakoti mnange talephana kuunikidwa kuja ndamatengera kupita ku polisi kuti kathandizike. Ubwino ulipo chifukwa choti kale timati tikamenyedwa kuti nyengedwe ulere kulomtizo tizathiwaphedwa timangozikhala zinthu simamuza wina aliyense. Pano pa tikaona zinthu zimene zozo mathama kwamuza mero champion uja akaisata nkhani jamayi tenga pano kwafa ku polisi. Pano pa tindu ufulo kwanina ndithu nkhanza zakhanga zachepa. Poyamba kwathoka tinali ndi ulesi kuti tisate nkhani kachidwa nkhanza ku polisi. Mangu siya nkhani polisi kuja makuti tisate nalibe chani nalibe kama. Mapano pa nkhani kwenda ndamero champion jamayi isata nkhani japana fike pa mapeto. Aone zoti kuti chilungamo chagona pati kuti nkhani yatha bwanji. Pamene chimachitika tikati kupangidwa nkhanza timaona kuti ku polisi ndikutali. Amene champion amakhali pafupi. Leo jana mama tamanga kutithandiza ndani kutithandiza ifeyo. Masa amafikira makastoma athu aja kumauza za ufulu wa ndani za ufulu wa ifeyo tsikwenda. Tikaona kuti pali mwana amene wachepera masana kone zake 18 timamuitana mwana uja kuyankhana naye. Tikaona kuti akutikanika timauza amene champion. Ndababwera mwana uyu ulepera kumunikira njira izi ndizi makukanika. Ndai waje mwaje mamutenga kumiza nda polisi apo sangoza mutenga mwana uja kuyanenga muna ngati polisi moja kama kuma mwenda social fair kubwera kwambirani kati zimatera kumenya. Chimama mabwera na babaka fika chimama atamangira wani amazoza kuti sakagwisia ntchito kondo mufa kondo musagwidani sakuiziwa. Sakakauti atenga matenda munja mangu kasina ngani mwana alowera kuti amatamuna kumango bwala lichikhalio samuza wina aliyense. Ongeza tingotoza kuti action of Malawi atithandiza kuti kutunikira nje zomwe tingamadusi koma ndi nkhanza kale simazowa maufulu athu simazowa ndifa anthu ofunika simazowa zifoli kuti fesa ndikandani ndikandi atimangozikhala. Mapano pati kumazoza kuti tikapangidwa nkhanza tilowera kwakuti oja action of Malawi. Pano pati malowa pena paliponse tilibe mantha ifo poyamba apo sitimaopa. Oyo tikafika kukuti timaopa ine hula ndikafika ku court ndipita ku polisi nkhani sima ndikomera. Mapano pa ndikafika pa polisi ndikala ndaule nkhani yanga ikumaenda bwinobwino mopanda so chinyingo chilichonse.
Besides physical violence, sexual violence also causes serious health problems, especially on sexual reproductive health. Intimate partner violence leads to negative sexual reproductive health consequences, including unwanted pregnancy, abortion, STIs including HIV, pregnancy complications, pelvic inflammatory disease, urinary tract infections, and sexual dysfunction. The abused women are more likely to suffer from depression, anxiety, and phobias than non-abused women. They also have more emotional distress, thoughts of suicide, and attempted suicide. Let's stop gender-based violence among sex workers now.
Please let me introduce the first session for the last sessions, which is Arwa Hashhash from the Palestinian organization Rural Women's Development Society. She will do a presentation on the work they do in their organization and also specifically a project where they've been working with fathers and their role in fighting gender-based violence. Arwa, I hope you're with us.
Yes, Sina, I'm with you.
You're here. Okay, so please take the floor, Arwa, and I know you also have to share a presentation with us.
Okay, so hello everyone again. Actually, I'm very happy to be with you today. As Sina said, my name is Arwa. I'm from Palestine, from Rural Women Development Society. It's also association is that based in Palestine. Actually, today I'm going to talk on behalf of my colleague Manar, who's supposed to be with us today to present this presentation, but she has her second dose of corona vaccine. So she couldn't join us today. That's why I'm going to present or share what she has already prepared. I will share the presentation now. So I would like to say that Manar's presentation is divided to 3 parts. The first part talking very briefly about rural women development society, and the second one is also very briefly talking about women's situation in Palestine, especially regarding the violence. And also the challenges that women and also organizations that work with the women or gender issues, the challenges that they face. And the third part and the last one is about approach called Baba approach, which is one of the most important approach that Roots have, or rural women development society have, that enables us to work
Arwa,
with.
I'm just gonna ask everybody that is not Arwa to turn off your microphone so we can hear what is being presented. Thank you.
Okay. So I said the third and the last part of the presentations is about an approach called Baba approach, which is one of the most important approach that my organization uses to work with men, especially fathers. So this is the structure of the presentation. So first about Roots or Rural Women Development Society. It's, as I said, Palestinian non-governmental organization working in West Bank and Gaza Strip, and it was founded in 1987. It was founded by a Palestinian organization called Agricultural Relief Committee, or PARC, and now it became independent organization. Roots actually have a very strong and grassroots presence in rural communities in Palestine, with more than 3,000 women members in a network of 57 women's club. And this unique structure distinguish Roots from other Palestinian women organizations. So our mission is to create a women movement in Palestinian rural areas that is capable of claiming and developing women's social and economic and political rights. Our strategic objectives, we have 3 strategic objectives. The first one is enhancing justice and equality between men and women, and reduce the violence against women and girls in Palestinian society. The other objective or strategic objective is enhancing the economic justice for women and girls in rural areas especially. And the last one is improving Roots' performance and efficiency and increasing its representation and influence at all levels, national, regional, and also international. And this is very brief about Roots, and here I will share with you some pictures. This is one of our workshop with women. This workshop was about violence against women. And this also another picture. It is a protest in front of the Palestinian Council of Ministries. In this protest, the Roots was calling for that government approve the family protection law. So, okay. And regarding the violence against women in Palestine, actually, women and girls in Palestine experience various kinds of violence, whether at their homes or within the society. And there was a national survey in 2019 shows that more than 29% of married women were exposed to at least one form of violence, psychological, economical violence, and physical and sexual. And more than 25 or 1/4 of all Palestinian women experience physical violence in home from their family members, mostly the fathers or the brothers, and from their intimate partners. Also, the situation of violence against women in Palestine is further complicated because of the occupation and the structures and policies of Israeli military occupation that are directed against Palestinians. There was a research shows that there is a very a direct link between the violence of Israeli military occupation and the patriarchal power. The violence of Israeli occupation promotes the patriarchal power within the Palestinian society. And the recent national study in violence against women illustrates that the highest rate of violence against women take place in Gaza. And I believe most of you watched the bombardment of Israeli over Gaza, and also Hebrew government. These are very, these two cities in Palestine that faces high level of violence from Israel. And also they show high level of violence against women. So regarding the challenges, we notice that there is a very growing influence of regional, religious, political, and cultural conservatism that very highly influencing the Palestinian society and negatively impact women's status. Also, there is an overlap of political will toward creating equality rights and opportunities for women and men. Another challenge is the lack of enforcement of laws, legislations, and strategies and policies for gender equality and women's rights. Also, and this is a challenge that I believe we share with other countries in the world, that violence against women is underreported, underestimated, because and also the available services underutilized because of this feeling of shame and the stigma, and also the law of awareness about the importance of talking about violence and reporting it. Also, one of the most challenge that we think we have to deal with is that most of the projects on violence against women target women only. But from our experience, we believe that targeting only women does not actually change much, and we need to involve men in these projects. And that's why Roots started to work more and more with men and with male youth during its recent projects. So regarding our projects, Roots since 2009 has implemented more than 50 projects, and 7 of them were in direct relation to violence against women. And one of the major part of our latest project focuses on raising awareness about violence against women and also domestic violence. And this is among the young generation. We focus much more about youth, on youth actually. And okay, that's about our main projects. Roots in all its projects concentrate on implementing, as I said, awareness workshops on violence against women, in addition to human and women rights topics, target women, youth, men, and also it engaging local councils in the rural areas in both West Bank and Gaza Strip. Also, we implement trainings on violence and gender equality. And also we organizing open days in schools to talk much about violence against women and domestic violence. And as I said, one of the most important approach that Roots starting to implement is Baba approach called Baba, and this approach was Roots done with the cooperation with Danish. Roots and Danner invited Baba, which is an organization in Danish organization actually. And during this project, Roots train male social workers and school social workers, and also Roots social workers and other stuffs, not only social workers, on how to apply this approach, and with a specific focus on violence within family. And to talk more about Baba, as I said, is a Danish NGO, and it's part of Foundation for Social Responsibility. It was established in 2013. And Baba, the methodology works to strengthen fathers within ethnic minority background by strengthening their involvement and participation in their children's lives, with focus on the father's individual resources, the resources that they already have. And Baba, during Baba, this project, we train volunteer fathers by first letting them engage and in change their own father role. And after that, they take the role and they work in their peer-to-peer approach, engaging fathers in their local communities to change their participation and to change actually their role as fathers. The Babas or the fathers in this approach, they use concrete tools and methods in their peer-to-peer work, focusing on appreciative communication, redefining the father role, patience, widening down conflicts, relationship with mother of their children, and children's how to raise children without violence, actually. And also the fathers who were participated in this project engage in dialogue with local social actors such as municipalities, schools, and to enable a viable collaboration between social institutions and families. Also, we implemented workshops for the fathers of students, mainly parents, and teachers and other are organized by their trained social workers. More than 400 fathers reached through the 17 male social workers trained in this Baba method, and which have gained a new perspective on their role as fathers and having a higher realization of the negative effects of violence, and further having new tools for their fatherhood. And we believe that this approach highly affected how they think about violence, how they started to believe that violence affects not only their women or their sisters or their daughters, but also affect their fatherhood itself. And the last thing that I want to say, this is a very, very new approach for Roots itself and also for Palestine. And we believe that our positive experience in our project has paved the way for increased focus on the benefit of involving families in our project, and also to the involving or engaging men in our projects. And we think that this engaging really has a very positive relation with the violence against women. And the last thing I want to share with you is pictures from our project. Here is the first picture. This is training with the school workers about the Baba approach. Here is also another workshop. Here another pictures from our projects. This project is with the students, open days day. Here's another picture, and this is also drawing, students drawing their about occupation. Okay, all what I have is just pictures. And This is all what I have, and I think Sina can add because Dana was a partner with us in this project. I am here for any clarifications. Thank you very much.
Begin. I don't have a lot to say, but just a few words. My name is Liv, and I work for SS Children's Village Denmark, and I am part of the organizing team. Some of you I've met in the breakout rooms, but not everyone. I will be just introducing very briefly the next presentation, which is SOS Peru. We don't work with SOS Children's Villages Peru directly here in Denmark, but we're all part of a big federation. So we all try to share knowledge and best practices as much as possible. So we're very grateful that SOS Peru will talk today about their project on positive active fatherhood. This is a project that they have done very successfully and have also won a prize for. So we're very excited to have them talk about their project, but also especially their approach and some of the learnings, the challenges, and some of the good experiences on how to engage men in active fatherhood. And I should say that this presentation will be in Spanish by my colleague, local colleague in Peru, Paula. She will speak in Spanish, so we will have a translation channel, and Anna, she will tell you how to do it technically. But we have an interpreter called Sophie who's joining us, so that everyone who speaks Spanish can stay in this main session, and then everyone who needs the English translations can go to an English channel. I just want to say thank you so much, Paula, for joining us today, and also Sophie. Right now it's 6:30 a.m. in Peru, so we're very, very happy that you wanted to join.
Good morning to all of you. My name is Paula Oliveira, and I will share with you today a presentation about the experience that we have on active fatherhood. Children's Villages Peru is an organization that has been working on this for several years. It is still a challenge, but we think that we have made significant progress in this. So first of all, I would like to start with this question. What does it mean to be a man in our society? Well, mainly because in Peru and in Latin America in general, we have a context in which machismo, male centrism, is very clear, and also the gender stereotypes are very strong. So many things that we often hear in Latin America are things like men don't cry, men must be strong, and they should not be afraid, and that women should stay in the house and the men should be on the streets. So these are some of the phrases that we often hear in Latin America and that strengthen the gender stereotypes. And so this is something that we are working on. A survey in Peru has shown that men dedicate 15 hours and 53 minutes per week to domestic and care work, whereas women devote 39 hours and 28 minutes to domestic and care work. This shows that in Peru, the topic of care, of domestic activities, and of child rearing are normally female activities. So these gender stereotypes, they really reinforce machismo, or male chauvinism, and also violence. So why did we want to have an intervention with men? I know that you have already talked about this in this meeting, but in a context like Peru and Latin America, it was very important to have this prior analysis, considering that Children's Villages works with families and that we work on avoiding separation of the children from their families. So we have concluded that violence is one of the main causes of the children being separated from their families. Violence against the children, violence against women, well, those are situations that cause the children to have a lack of protection or even to become orphans. In addition to this, the gender stereotypes limit the fathers and the men from looking after the children. So what we wanted to do with our proposal was to prevent child abuse against and also to prevent gender-based violence. With the proposal, we also wanted to break stereotypes and we wanted to promote gender equality. That was the purpose of the proposal. With this proposal, we also focused on strengthening the role of the parents, of the fathers in child's care, because that's very weak in our context. We also wanted to prevent family separation. And with the proposal, we also wanted to improve the quality of life of all members of the family. A father who is involved in parenting and in childcare is a father who will encourage a positive relationship within the family. That was what we sought with the proposal. How did we start with this proposal in Peru? Through children's villages. Well, in the year 2014, we started with this process. It was a 2-year process to build this proposal based on a project that we already had. A project that was called Care for Me, Care for You. That was a proposal to work on violence. And thanks to this, we were able to develop a validation of sessions, of workshops on this topic. Care for Me was a proposal that was very important because it started to ensure visibility of male involvement in parenting. So this experience started in Lima, in the capital of Peru, and then it was systematized. So as a reference, we used the campaign on men care, which was a Latin American campaign. And so that was the reference for us to start developing the workshop with the fathers. In 2017 and 2018, we had a methodology transfer process with some of our local programs. So it was no longer Lima, but we rolled out the process to other cities like Huancayo and Ayacucho. So in those cities, we started with the methodology transfer process, focusing on training for fathers. And then as the national association, it was also necessary to include this proposal in our annual operational plan. By including this proposal in our annual operational plan, since 2019, we started implementing our active fatherhood proposal in absolutely all towns where we work, which is 9 cities. Basically, we work in 9 cities in Peru. And so in the 9 cities, we implemented the proposal of active fatherhood to train fathers and male caregivers at the national level to strengthen their caregiving role. Now, what is the content of this proposal? As I mentioned, in 2015, we had the first systematization with some publications on active fatherhood. The name that we used is Soy tu papá y eso te hace bien. I'm your father and that is good for you. That was the name with which we launched our training proposal for fathers and male caregivers. And in 2019, we improved our training proposal and we prepared a new module to encourage active fatherhoods. So in 2019, we had the 2nd edition of the publication. And then last year, because of the pandemic, this module, this module is like an educational guide to train the fathers. And normally this is like in-person training, but because of the pandemic last year, what we did last year is that in order not to lose our progress in this topic, and in order not to lose the positioning of this topic, we adapted our training module to the virtual environment. And so in 2020, we started providing virtual sessions with the same content, using the same methodology, and making some adjustments, of course, to the virtual environments. But well, we seek the same purpose with the virtual module. And if you work virtually, the thing is that you can reach many fathers and male caregivers, but you can also involve more men in general who are interested in this topic. So through the virtual environment, we became more visible. And this year we continue with the virtual training. This is the structure of our training module on active fatherhood. So we have 5 sessions in our module. The first session is about how do we learn to be fathers? How do we learn to be fathers? Well, there we have reflections about the experience of the men themselves, about the care they received from their own parents. And in this session, we have some activities. For example, we work with the backpack activity. I really like the backpack activity because what we do with the backpack activity is, well, we have a reflection. So the men themselves engage in a reflection about the symbolical backpack. And the backpack is basically a symbol for the stereotypes that they have. And so the men, sometimes they say, you know, sometimes it's even the women who carry this backpack of the stereotypes, because sometimes the women, the mothers, assign a role to the men. For example, that the man should not do the dishes, and that the man should not do the cooking. So these are stereotypes carried by men and women, so by both men and women. So the stereotypes are represented by the backpack. And so the idea is that they gradually get rid of these stereotypes and of this backpack of stereotypes. So as I said, we have 5 sessions in the in-person training. The second session, for example, is also a very significant session. It's about pregnancy from the male experience. And so that session is a reflection about engaging men also in pregnancy and from pregnancy. And so the process during pregnancy and also after pregnancy. In this session on pregnancy, we have an activity called A Message for You. You are going to be a dad. So basically that's a letter addressed to the dads. And then we analyze how they react, how the fathers react when they find out that they're going to be fathers, and what they're going to do with this as part of their life. And so based on all these reflections, we try to raise awareness, and we try to ensure commitment of the fathers to childcare. Okay, 5 minutes left. Okay, and then a little bit more about the methodology. So the target population is the fathers and male caregivers. The goal is to promote active participation of the men in daily care activities. And so for the men to have a joint responsibility together with the women regarding parenting. And the aim of this is to avoid violence. What we have used in terms of methodology is participation based on the experience of the fathers. It's also peer-to-peer learning among the fathers. The trainings are developed by both men and women, so they both work as facilitators. And today the methodology is virtual. When we have in-person training, well, in in-person training, we also have activities like fairs, championships, soccer championships, festivals, etc. Because it is always a challenge to have the men participate. At the moment, in the virtual module, we have 4 virtual sessions. And in the in-person training, we have 5 sessions. Every session lasts for 2 hours on average. Some of the accomplishments, well, we have been able to produce changes and improvements among the men, but based on their own experience. So it's important to listen to them, to reflect with them, and to raise awareness based on that reflection with the men. Another accomplishment is the positive changes among the men in terms of their attitudes on topics such as gender, equity, violence, sexual and reproductive health. So there is a greater awareness and a greater sensitization on these topics. And so it becomes possible to speak with the men about these topics. At the beginning, it's always a challenge, but then they become more open. Another accomplishment is that the men devote more time to child care and parenting, and also to household activities. Another accomplishment is that the participants feel more confident to express their emotions, which is not easy for the men, but they learn to do this in this space. And the last accomplishment is that as children's villages, we have been recognized by the local partners as experts in this topic. Some of the learnings, well, one lesson learned is that it is important to work with the community. We cannot do this on our own. We have to work with the community to make this issue more visible. We also have to constantly innovate our strategies to reach more men. That's a constant challenge, honestly. And that is why within the context of the pandemic, we had to adapt to the virtual environments. So that was an innovation. Another learning is that it's important to have follow-up. It's not sufficient to train a man. It's not sufficient to only have the 4 or 5 sessions. It is necessary to have subsequent follow-up to talk about the putting into practice of what they learned. And then the final learning is that we think it is important to work in partnership with other institutions, governmental institutions also, so that we can reach out to more fathers and more men. We cannot do this on our own. And then here we have this testimonial of one of the fathers who participated in the sessions. And you know, sometimes the men, they participate because their wife incentivizes them to participate. And sometimes for them, it's difficult to be there discussing these issues with other men. But at the end of the day, we always see that the men finalize the modules. And so this shows their